Agenda item 9, discussion and possible action regarding ordinance 2013-03, text amendment to Article 5, Section 5.02 of the Carefree Zoning Ordinance, allowing residential units on the second story of existing buildings in commercial zoning. Mr. Stingley.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, for your time. I won't go through the entire packet. We have a summary of the results of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting recommending approval for the zoning ordinance text amendment and some of the background that went into the research. Text amendment currently changes the current standards so that you would be able to do a second-story residential unit above retail or office. There are quite a few instances in the Carefree Town Center in which there are vacant office spaces that are a little bit more difficult to lease due to visibility and the upstairs location. And when we performed the general plan update, we noticed that there is an excess of office in terms of a ratio to retail. And so in looking at the possible options to help landlords in the town center lease space, this text amendment offers them an additional tool, which we believe will help bring more people into the town center and improve the viability of the existing buildings and foot traffic, which will ultimately help retail in the area. Currently, residential is only allowed in commercial zoning under this category where you may build a mixed-use project that is new, up to 3 stories, and it's centered only in the very core of the town center, fronting Easy Street, no other arterial street. But the standards currently do not allow existing buildings to be retrofitted for residential, commercial mixed use. And so this text amendment addresses that, point out that this allowance doesn't apply to all buildings. It only applies to existing buildings that have the parking on site that can be specifically designated for those residential units that will be converted. In addition, before the conversion can happen, they have to comply with the building code requirements, which is a given. Our building official must approve the residential occupancy subject to the building code standards for Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and other standards related to utilities and structural aspects. And in terms of zoning, an applicant must obtain approval from the zoning administrator to ensure that the standards in your packet are met before they proceed with the building permit.
DJ, you spoke about the ADA. That's only if there's what, more than 2 residential units in the building?
The ADA requirements are the same for multifamily, and it's not 2, but it's 5. If there are 5 or more units, then some sort of ADA requirement will be necessary, such as an elevator. Some of the buildings have elevators right now, some of them do not. Other aspects of that, of the building code, and I guess it's not really ADA related, but related to building code would be fire escape and APS, electrical connections, water connections, and who manages that, how will that be installed, etc.
Councilman Crane.
I have a question. So I understand this is for existing buildings in the commercial area, and our current zoning allows for in the very core for new construction. But if there's a vacant lot, say it's a 1-acre vacant lot, and someone wants to build a commercial property there with residential on top, how would they proceed?
So a new building is what you're saying.
New building.
They would have to obtain a conditional use permit, and if there are any deviations or special considerations for parking, for instance, underground parking, that would require, in addition, a development agreement that would have to be ratified by the town council. A conditional use permit is a 4 to 6 month process in which the Planning and Zoning Commission reviews the request, makes a recommendation to town council, and then the town council approves it before a building permit could be obtained.
To answer that question, I'm confused. When you use the word standards, what standards are you talking about?
Number of square feet, building code, two parking spaces, the physical stuff. The standards for the conditional use permit that are in the body of the existing ordinance speak of additional building height. And the reason why it speaks of additional building height is as a result of that provision, we wanted to increase the parking capacity in the town center. In order to compensate for the parking capacity, and this parking capacity was going to be put in structures underground. The average cost of a parking space underground is $20,000. To economically pencil that out, you had to increase the intensity and density of the product, the mixed-use product. So the existing one in the ordinance that requires a conditional use permit speaks of standards to create an economic incentive through additional intensity, height, and density in the residential product. The new provision doesn't allow for additional height. What it speaks to, and doesn't require parking to be placed underground. What it speaks to is diversifying use with the condition that if you put residential on that second floor, on your site, you have to dedicate parking for that residential use.
Per unit.
Per unit. So 2 spaces per unit. And the reason for that, the logic behind that is obviously we don't want people parking along Easy Street where the retail parking is. So we want parking dedicated to that residential use on lot behind the storefront.
We won't count the parking spaces in front of that particular building
No.
for residential.
Because all it says is such spaces shall be specifically reserved for the associated residential units, and the landlord could designate spots in front of the commercial space.
On their site. In front is on Easy Street, it's not their site. That's public parking.
Okay.
This applies to all of the town center, not just Easy Street.
That is correct.
For instance, if the Galleria building wanted to make their upper floor area, they would just have to designate parking spaces for those units.
That is correct. It's all commercial zoning.
Thank you.
I note that you took the minimum size for each residential unit from 1,500 to 1,200 square feet. Can you talk about 1,200 in terms of intended uses, number of people? How you got to 1,200 is really what I'm asking.
That only applies to the new vertical mixed-use projects, and 1,200 is standards we've seen elsewhere in the development community in the valley. They often even go lower than 1,200, but we felt like that was 1,200 was better than for Carefree's standards than 1,000.
I have 2 questions. Parking space, does that imply any type of garage enclosure, or is it simply room on the ground without any garage enclosure?
There could be room on the ground.
So we're not forcing the people who do this to provide garages for their tenants, just parking spaces. The second question I have, and I just want to get this in the public record, Pima Norte is not in a commercial district, as I believe. Pima Norte does have a 2-story building. They would not be permitted to do this. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Council Arthur Jimson, 5690 East Canyon Creek Circle, Carefree. In 28 years with Hilton Hotels, I served in 10 different locations. And in many of those locations, I was in a downtown environment. In addition, in my post-hospitality career, I was responsible for the development of a master plan for a 700-acre site in Queensland, Australia. Nothing is better for a community than 24/7 activity. And if that includes residential over retail, I support it 100%. Thank you.
Councilman Miller is making a motion to adopt ordinance 2013-03.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Price. Like I just said, I have a motion and a second to approve agenda item 9, adopt ordinance 2013-03. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.